One of the foundational practices of the C3WP is the Atwoodian Table. And you'll see this concept of joining a conversation that's already in progress in several of the C3WP instructional resources. So I wanted to take a minute to give you sort of an overview and let you explore this. So I'll share my screen. And we will start learning about the Atwoodian Table. So the Atwoodian Table is an approach to helping students understand civic arguments. So what are the arguments, the civic arguments in their community? And what do policymakers engage in order to ultimately develop policies or laws? And so the process of that is what the Atwoodian Table sort of invites students to join into that. I want to start off with saying that the idea for this Atwoodian Table is firmly grounded in argument theory. And so I have some quotes here. Williams and McInerney define argument not as wrangling, or not as fussing and bickering and fighting. That's not the way we want to think about argument, but as a serious and focused conversation among people who are intensely interested in getting to the bottom of things cooperatively. So there's this idea that we need to teach our students that argument, they may think argument is yelling, screaming, fussing, fighting, bickering, wrangling, as Williams and McInerney say. And we need to teach them that it's not that. It's a conversation. It's a cooperative conversation to get to the bottom of something. And it's intense. People are really intensely interested in doing that. It's not that it doesn't get heated at times, but it's civic and civil. And the value of this goes well beyond the classroom or workplace. So it's really vitally important that we teach this to our students. And here's another person who refers to argument as a conversation. Richard Fulkerson puts it in Teaching the Argument in Writing. The proper context for thinking about argument is one in which the goal is not victory. So you're not trying to win. An argument is not something you win. But the goal is a good decision, one in which all arguers are at risk of needing to alter their views. And the participants need to take seriously and fairly the views that are different from his or her own. So it's not yell and scream and I'll win. It's listening and thinking and really considering multiple perspectives and being willing to have my mind changed or my views altered. Such capacities are broadly important for living in the diverse literate, being a diverse literate educated person in the 21st century. So there's a metaphor, another person who has really sort of struggled to help people understand the way we should think of argument, and that is Kenneth Burke. And so Kenneth Burke has this metaphor of the unending conversation. It's really, really fascinating. And this metaphor is referred to as the Burkean parlor because Kenneth Burke developed the metaphor. So I'm going to read through this and we're going to try it out with a topic. So we're going to take a topic through the metaphor, and the topic is small government versus big government, okay? So you would probably agree that this is an unending conversation. So this has been going on a long time and it's not going to end anytime soon, if ever. So imagine that you enter a parlor. Now a parlor evokes it's a civil type atmosphere. You come late. When you arrive, others have long preceded you. and they're engaged in a heated discussion. So let's think about our topic. Other people, we're late to this conversation, right? We're late to it because it's been going on for a long time. Small government versus big government. It's heated because it's important. It's something of substance. It's not who's the best quarterback in the NFL. This is something that is a weighty matter. And so if it's weighty, if something has implications for society, then a discussion of it might get a little heated, which doesn't mean that it's not civil. So others have long preceded you. Other people have been having this big government, small government conversation. And the conversation is too heated for them to pause and tell you exactly what it's about. In fact, this discussion had begun long before any of them even got there. So the big government, small government has been going on longer than anybody who's currently having the conversation. And nobody there is really qualified to retrace all of it for you. And so you have to listen. You have to listen for a while. Now, this listening, the parallel of that is researching and reading. So students are engaged in learning about a heated topic where there's people who have multiple perspectives on it. And rather than just jumping in and saying what you think about it, you listen for a while. And that means you read and you research and you learn. So you listen for a while until you decide that you've caught the tenor of the argument. What's the tone of it? What's all the stuff going on here? All the nuances. And then, and only then, only after you've listened for a while and learned and become informed, do you put in your or. Now, or is something that's going to take you further. It's going to add something else. It's going to further the conversation. So it's not, hey, I agree with what she said. Yeah, I agree with what he said. That's not putting in your or. Putting in your or is adding something that will further the conversation. Someone answers, you answer him. Another comes to your defense, another aligns himself against you, to either the embarrassment or gratification of your opponent, depending upon the quality of your ally's assistance. So think about big government, small government. Let's say you're for small government. And let's say that there are other people, you're doing research and you find that other people are also for small government, but they're for it for reasons that may be embarrassing to you. Those are not the reasons that you're for it. Their reasons are not, they don't really have a lot of quality. And so you may be embarrassed by that or gratified. And your opponent may be gratified by it or embarrassed by it. If the quality of your ally's assistance or your source is high quality, then someone who has an opposing view from yours might be a little embarrassed and think, oh, that's a good point. Now I sort of feel embarrassed that my point wasn't as good. However, and this is important, however the discussion is interminable, the hour grows late, you must depart, and you do, and the discussion is still vigorously in progress. So that's with big government, small government, it's going to go on. The hour will grow late, we must depart. And the discussion is still happening. It's still going to happen for generations after we're no longer here. A lot of times students think that they're going to enter a discussion and they're just going to end it and there'll be a mic drop. No, if the discussion is something, if the issue is something of substance, really it's going to be something that's going to continue for a while. You won't have the final word. So when I was first introduced, I'm going to stop the share for just a minute and talk about this Burkean parlor metaphor. It's excellent. It's really, really excellent. And I have used it with some high school students and they got it. understood it, some students, but I always struggle to help students really understand how to enact this metaphor. While they seem to understand it and could talk a topic through it, it didn't always translate to their writing. So the conversation didn't always show up in their writing. And younger students didn't understand the parlor at all. So I developed a metaphor of who's at the table. And I call it the Atwoodian Table because Kenneth Burke has his Burkean parlor and I have my Atwoodian Table. So I want to introduce that to you, and we'll play around with it and walk some topics through it. And again, this is the foundational practice in a lot of the resources, whether it's named or not. It's this idea of argument as a conversation is implicitly there. So again, a lot of students didn't get the parlor, but they understood the table, and the table is very aligned to most states who have writing. Argument writing is one of their standards. The Atwoodian Table is very aligned to that. And I want to say some really important parts about the table, some really key points. It's round. That is so important. It's not square or rectangular because there aren't really sides to this. Someone might hold your view, but not for the same reasons, and you wouldn't consider yourself on their side. And we don't want to think about important issues as pro and con, for, against, this side, that side. If people are really thinking deeply, then they're thinking beyond, I'm for big government, I'm against big government. Typically, people are more nuanced in their claims about the big things. They might be for big government when it comes to the military, but small government when it comes to regulations on your daily life. So there's nuance, and it's not as if we would have one side or another. So the table is round, no sides. And when you put together readings for your students to do research, it's important that you find sources, texts and sources that represent multiple perspectives that go beyond pro-con for the reasons that I just laid out. So let's try this one out with our topic, small government versus big government. So there are people right now who believe in, so for example, our governor believes in small federal government, but he sort of believes in big state government, and he has reasons for that. So we could put him at the table. He has a perspective. And then you could just have text from viewpoints of lots of governors, or you could have some presidents here. You could have Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton. This has been going on. This conversation has been going on since then, and even before. So the important thing here is big government, small government would be your topic. Your texts are from multiple perspectives, and each perspective adds a layer to the issue. And only after you have done some deep reading and research about this topic, listening to some experts, maybe some historians, then you can pull up your chair to the table and make a claim. But remember, with the parlor, you got there late, and you don't need to come in the door talking. People will immediately realize you're not informed. You need to listen a while. Listen, get the tenor of the conversation, listen, learn, research, then pull up a chair. So let's see what this would actually look like in the classroom with some argument writing. Here's an example. Animal testing. Let's say you have a text set, and I actually have one, a text set on animal testing from multiple perspectives. So students would draw the table, write the topic, give chairs to people who are at the table. So the CVMA is at the table, the California Veterinary Medicine Association. They have some things to say about animal testing. So the students read a text and they learn the position of the CVMA on this topic, and then they write on a Post-it what the CVMA's position is on the topic. Then they learn what Kelly Overton has a seat at the table. She's a biomedical researcher, and she has a position on the topic. She has some points of agreement with the CVMA and some points where she doesn't agree with them. Remember, it's not pro-con, for or against. Frankie Troll, another expert, has a seat at the table. She's an expert. She's very credible. And here are her views. So the students can do this with Post-its, or they can actually write in the balloons, the word balloons. And then Michelle McKay also has a position and reasons for her position. So then after the student has learned the positions of several experts and the reasons, and they feel they've really got the tone and the tenor of the conversation and they understand it, then they can pull up a chair at the table and make their own claim and tell why they have that claim. And their reasons are typically, are things they learned from these people. So let's look at another example and try it out. So there's this issue, a lot of people are talking about it, about should fancy restaurants ban kids? Many restaurants are beginning to ban kids under the age of 12. Fancy restaurants. Now, we're not talking about fast food or family-oriented cafes or diners. We're talking about fancy restaurants. This is happening nationwide and worldwide. Google it and you can see. So I've put together a text set on this, and I've used it with students, and we use this concept of the Atwoodian table. So the first thing we want to do is find out what are people saying about the topic. We want to listen to their viewpoint before we say our opinion and make a claim and start talking, because you don't want to be uninformed and say what you think, because other people who are informed will realize right away, this person does not know what she's saying, so I'm not going to listen. So then here's what the kids would do. You'd say, so we're going to explore this issue of fancy restaurants banning kids. And they're all, the kids are like, what? I didn't know this. And they really want to know about it. And they start to say, oh, they shouldn't, all this. And so, no, you want students to really understand, okay, we have to listen first. This is a civil conversation. We're not going to come in yelling and screaming and saying what we think. We're going to learn, and then we can have an actual educated opinion about this topic. So I typically just have kids draw that circle, just like you saw in the example. Kids at fancy restaurants is the topic. And then as we learn, we're going to put a seat at the table for the experts we're learning from. We'll draw a word balloon beside each chair, and we'll write what we learned from that person. Let's just try it out. So we have 4 experts at the table. We have Mara Judkis, Theo Sellis, Troy Taylor, and a parent. Parents have opinions about this too, right? They have a lot of experience with it. So here they are. So the kids would draw their table and a chair for each person. Notice the student doesn't have a chair at the table yet. The student's not here yet. They can't be here until they've learned. So Mara Judkis says bans on children happen after a restaurant has observed a pattern of children misbehaving, damaging property, or getting in the way, or when other customers complain. Sometimes the complaints come from other parents. So other parents are complaining about this, and here's why. They're paying like top dollar at a fancy restaurant, $120. for their meal and for a babysitter. So some parents leave their kids at home and they pay a babysitter, and then they come to the restaurant and other parents didn't hire a babysitter. They brought their kids with them, and then they can't enjoy their high-priced fancy meal because these other people didn't get a babysitter. Okay. So Mara Judkis has a seat. So the kids would fill this in. They can do it on Post-its or actually write in the balloons. They can work alone or in pairs or in small groups. And they say the name and what this person thinks about it. That the bans are happening because there's a need for it. There's problems. Parents are complaining. Kids are complaining. Restaurant owners are complaining. Okay. So here's Theo Sellis, and he's a family therapist. And he says, no, it's discrimination. You can't ban them. If you say yes to one group and no to another, you're discriminating. You can't do that. And people are just picking on kids. Other people are making noises, but kids are kind of the obvious producers of the noises. But his stance is this. So we're going to add him. And he says banning kids is discrimination. Can't let some people come and not others. It's picking on kids. Okay. So we're learning. Experts are not really agreeing here all the time. And now we have a restaurant owner, and let's see what Troy Taylor, a Florida restaurant owner, has to say. And I have links here to the full text if you want if you wanted your students to read the full article. The decision to ban children came after a dangerous incident with a child on our patio. It's basically about children's safety. So a child got hurt, and the restaurant made the decision, okay, we need to ban kids. And he says, it's not because we don't like kids. I couldn't stand to have someone get hurt, especially a kid on our watch. So sometimes the bans are for the safety of the children. So let's add a balloon for him. They're for kids, not against them. And the restaurant owner doesn't want to be responsible for kids being hurt. And then you have a parent response to a survey. And this parent says, people are paying for their food and their table. Why can't they have their kids? Not all children are annoying, and that's true. I've been in restaurants where there have been kids there and they're very quiet and well behaved, sometimes more behaved than a rowdy group of adults. And so she says, instead of making blanket bans on children, so no children can be here, then you should deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So the restaurant owner should just go to the person if they're old or young, and the people should be asked to leave. But she says bans don't make sense. So let's give her a seat at the table. And she says anybody who's being loud has to leave. You're paying for the table. You should be able to bring your children. So now that we know the whole, overview of the issue, we've heard from a lot of people. Now I can pull up my chair to the table. I can type my name here. And I can now make my claim. And I can, let's say, fancy restaurants. I want to add something new, remember? Should have kid hours when parents with kids can't dine. Why not? That's a solution to the problem, right? There's not a total ban. Maybe if you're going to bring your kids, you come between 5:30 and 8. And then people would know there might be kids there. And if they want to risk it, they could come. If not, they could come at 8 for dinner. Just a thought, okay? So then I'll pull my chair over here. What would I say to Mara? Bans happen as a result of something. Customers complain. Other parents complain when they hire a babysitter to enjoy a night out. Well, see, I agree, right? I have some points of intersection. I don't think that the kids should be there at the same time that maybe those parents who have hired a babysitter are there. And so I can say some things to her. I can have a conversation with her. So then when I write my argument, I now know how to use Mara's words in my argument. I can say, while Mara Judkis makes a good point when she says this, having certain hours when students are there, when kids are there, when kids are there, is a compromise and could be a compromise that would make everyone happy. Okay. And so then I would pull up my chair to each of these people. And see, I sort of agree with him, right? I don't believe there should be a kid ban. I just believe they should have certain hours when they go. So my claim is nuanced. And so I could say, I agree with Theo Sellis when he says this, but banning kids is discrimination, and having certain hours is not a ban on kids, but it also allows people who don't want to be around the kids to not have to be there when they're there. And then what would I say to Troy Taylor? Hands are for kids and not against them, and responsible for being hurt. I think I might kind of combine Troy and the parent, and say to Troy that during these kid hours, maybe there could be signs posted with rules like no running. I can't imagine that somebody would get hurt. I mean, I don't know, maybe they stabbed themselves with a fork or something, but probably it wasn't that. So maybe post some signs, and the hostess, when the parents with kids come in, could like direct their attention to the signs and say, you know, and if you don't follow these rules, you may be asked to leave. Maybe that would help. Okay. So once I've done that, once I pulled my chair up and talked to each of these people, I kind of know now how to use their words in my own argument when I write an argument about this issue. When I make my claim and give reasons and evidence for my claim, I can use quotes from these people in my argument, and now I know how to use them. So now I'm more prepared to write my argument, and I know what to do with my sources and how to use them to forward my argument, my claim, because I have done this table exercise. So that's the Atwoodian table. There are multiple uses for it. I've just kind of given you an example of one way to use it. I've also used role play to good effect. So like, for example, and students become the sources. So I say, okay, this group over here, you're going to be Mara Judkis. And this group over here, you're going to be Theo Sellis. And this group is going to be Troy Taylor. And this group is going to be a parent. And you have to read your text. You have to prepare for the role play. You tell what your stance is and why you've taken that stance. And then you talk to each other. So just like I moved my chair around and talked to each of them, they move their chair around and talk to the other sources, but they are that source. So they become that source. And students really like that, and they start to really get into the nuances of the argument, and it can make their argument stronger. You could also just use it for conflict resolution, for when you're not even writing an argument. So you could use it for that. You can use it to surface feelings and fears about a current situation. You can say, this is what's going on right now, and you all know we're in the middle of a pandemic. What are your fears and why? What are your feelings and why? What are your hopes and why? And it can build classroom community and help students feel safe surfacing their fears. But I'm interested to know always how teachers are using it, and there are multiple uses of this. And let me know how you decide to use it. But you will, in C3WP, use it to strengthen your students' arguments, because engaging in this before you write, and pulling your chair up beside all of those people really bumps up the quality of student writing. So that's the Atwoodian table. It's one of the foundational practices of C3WP.